Hey everyone, it's Bob. Welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. Today we're exploring the transformative power of AI across the entire talent lifecycle with two exceptional guests, Michael Palys and Mike Patchen, co-founders of Colleva. They both bring extensive experience from financial services, strategy consulting, and executive coaching. Michael and Mike discuss the impact of AI avatars across all of these different scenarios, including executive coaching, sales training, talent acquisition, performance management, and other areas of talent development and employee insight. We talk about their proactive measures to ensure fairness and mitigate bias, including their recent independent audit of their solution, which of course I applaud. And we touch on their upcoming participation and sponsorship in the NYU Coaching and Technology Summit, which is coming up quickly on July 7th and 8th in New York City. I am fortunate to be attending myself, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for tuning in. I think Mike and Michael share a lot of critical insights around the future of responsible, impactful AI across the workforce and workplace. Thanks for listening. To Elevate Your AIQ, I am your host, Bob Pulver. With me today, I have two special guests, Michael Palys and Mike Patchen. How are you guys doing?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Bob.
Absolutely. So we met, I think, last year or earlier this year through the, AI governance, responsible AI sort of channels. And I know that you guys care deeply about responsible AI and the work that you're doing at Colleva, I think is fantastic. Looking forward to seeing you guys in the event in New York, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. But I just thought to kick things off, why don't you guys each just make an introduction about your background and what the work you're doing at Colleva, and then we'll get into some of these interesting topics. So, Michael, why don't you start?
Sure. So, Michael Palys, my background, started my career on Wall Street in the financial services industry, worked in private equity and public markets investing prior to joining McKinsey & Company as a strategy consultant. Worked at McKinsey and then corporate strategy at Danaher Corporation, which was a Fortune 500 conglomerate, and then returned back to the investment management business where I was the partner and chief risk officer at a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. And then, along the way, Mike and I actually known each other for a long time. We actually met in undergrad. We both went to University of Pennsylvania and met actually initially over a Washington Redskins football game with some friends and, stayed in touch and ended up working together later in our careers. But I'll let Mike touch on that.
Yeah, so I have the good fortune of working with Michael middle of my career. Similar to Michael, began my career in finance, was a portfolio manager, researcher, and data scientist, and really kind of building large-scale analytics across my whole journey. As I progressed in my career, I became a partner at AQR Capital, actually one of the founding members earlier in my career. And I went from managing a small team to a large team and realized that there were a lot of things I just didn't know. Got access to executive coaching, which could really open up my eyes to, kind of quite frankly, what I got access to and what my team did not, but also the benefits. And so when Michael and I were thinking about how we would do partner together, that, became very quickly top of mind.
Nice. Okay. So I know that the Colleva platform, you've got a couple of interesting use cases that I want to make sure we cover. And so when I think about the coaching aspect, I guess, I'd like to unpack a little bit about, the transition and the logical connection to, the genesis of Colleva. Was there one particular use case that you started with and you expanded from there? So maybe if you guys want to just take a crack at giving us an overview of Colleva, maybe that'll sort of reveal itself naturally.
Yeah, no, Bob. So where we started really was really on the AI coaching side. As Mike alluded to, we both benefited from executive coaching throughout our careers. I'd worked at very large companies with very sophisticated people processes. I think McKinsey, frankly, being probably among the best at them, and really benefited from that experience. And when we saw, obviously, the rise of LLMs and so forth, thought there was an opportunity to democratize that, and really in a way that was suited to high performance environments and high performance cultures. And so I think the link is in finance. It's somewhat limited attention span theater, need very high time to value, limited patience, frankly, kind of like traditional learning or coaching solutions and so forth. And so we wanted to build something we ourselves would like to use, given the backgrounds that we had. And, what I would say about Colleva is really it's a face-to-face avatar coaching platform. We started initially, maybe uniquely, frankly, end of 2023, really enabling face-to-face conversations on screen with an avatar in real time. We thought text chatbots they were new, but would become commoditized. We thought same thing around voice, and we thought people, relate better to faces, right? And so, that was sort of the initial use case and where we got started.
Yeah, I mean, I think what became very interesting quickly for us is that because we had those face-to-face conversations and people, linked to the emotion, it basically meant that the AI was able to play many roles. We originally thought that it would come on as a coach, and then we realized that it could do role play very effectively and take on the persona of whoever you're talking to, whether it's a difficult conversation, a presentation you have to give. But then we also realized early on that it actually was good at interviewing. And so what's happened over time, and Michael can talk about it, is how we've expanded from being a pure coach to really a talent co-pilot across the entire life cycle of the employee journey.
And this is, I mean, there's really no, I totally get the connection now on the financial services side, but obviously, there's a lot of opportunity across industries and across markets, really. I mean, there's not that many people that, couldn't benefit from, what you've built. Is that fair? Is there a particular market that you're targeting? I mean, you can't go after everybody, right?
Yeah. So Bob, I think where we've seen our initial traction, obviously based on both Mike and my backgrounds, has been enterprise financial services, as we talked about, not just on the coaching side, but also things like sales coaching, sales enablement, and so forth, using AI avatars to help sales teams, right, ramp more quickly and so forth on things like product. We've also been doing work in healthcare. And some of this comes to our work, frankly, our initial work on the AI coaching, in particular around soft skills training. And we're doing work in healthcare environments with simulations and role play using avatars for things like provider and patient interactions, to help improve, frankly, doctor-patient communication, improve NPS scores on things like that for clients. And we're also doing work with like frontline support staff in kind of healthcare environments as well. So those are some of the initial markets that we've been working in.
But Bob, do you intend to go to your point about industry? I think it's anywhere, as Michael mentioned, where it's high performance environment and where the conversations really matter. So an example in healthcare, if you have to de-escalate a situation and you can role play that in a safe space, or if you can learn how to speak with empathy, those conversations really matter. So it's not industry specific, it's pretty industry agnostic. It's more situation specific. And the AI, again, plays a really powerful role in creating that safe space, certifying you before you have those conversations. So you're not practicing with patients, you're not practicing with clients, not practicing with your peers. You can really practice until you get it right, and you can actually have the conversations for real.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, I'm not familiar with that space. I know the healthcare space, especially like frontline workers, that's a really tough market right now. There's a lot of turnover. It's hard to find, nursing staff and things like that. So I guess without having the context of how they were doing this before, obviously something wasn't working. So I guess I'm curious to get your perspective about how impactful this has been for some of the clients in the space, because it just seems like I can't, if I were, a hospital administrator, someone hiring that kind of staff, I'd be like, I where have you been? Like I could have used this so long ago. My life would be so much, well, not so much, but this would be a huge market improvement for the way we've been doing it.
Yeah, I think what's happened historically, let's just take physicians as an example, right? I mean, in medical school, there's the concept of a standardized patient, right? Where they're practicing, doctor-patient interactions, like we said, sort of like in a student environment with a standardized patient, et cetera. And that's not something they really have access to later, right? And it's live patients. Where we found success on the healthcare side is with multi-site operators, or with companies that are doing sort of virtual or kind of hybrid models of delivering healthcare, where they're bringing on, onboarding lots of new staff. You mentioned different types of churn, and basically as they come on board, typically they would have been trained by an instructor, right? Welcome to company XYZ, here's kind of our way of doing things, and so forth. Very labor intensive, right? And what's happened now is they're using Colleva to really do that training in a standardized way, provide, kind of simulations and role play to, enhance their own kind of corporate model. Like an analogy might be something like, maybe not something like Chick-fil-A, right? When you drive through Chick-fil-A, there's a, at the end of your interaction, they say that this sort of like, there's a standard way you kind of believe Chick-fil-A, whatever, there's certain things they say, et cetera, whatever. Same kind of analogy in healthcare where people want to standardize those interactions. Same things in sales. People want to standardize those interactions. And so using avatars to help reinforce that behavior is something we've been doing.
Nice. And there's the sales coaching piece, which I just think is fantastic. And I haven't seen as many. I've been admittedly too close on the talent acquisition side and understanding the AI interview space, which, as you guys know, is a pretty hot area right now. And I want to dig into that a little bit more. But on the sales coaching side, I feel like this is, particularly relevant for, these are revenue generating roles, right? So the more impactful that someone can do, whether it's, consultative selling or, whatever their strategy is to make sure that people understand the impact of, just how they're performing, how they're handling those meetings, how they're handling objection, upselling, all kinds of scenarios. So I thought you guys talk a little bit about that use case as well.
Yeah, I think you just said it. Natural extension for us from the learning and development side and the coaching side, right? As we were working with clients, they enjoyed the learning experience, and sales and sales enablement, as you said, is kind of revenue generating, very clear ROI use case and so forth. And so in that example, it's using AI role play and simulations, again, with avatars to, practice face-to-face client skills, right? So if you think about environments like onboarding reps, right? And take in a financial environment, pitching new product and that sort of thing, right? Getting reps up to speed quickly by allowing them to practice with those materials helps decrease ramp times for those reps to get up to speed and improve efficacy of kind of how they're handling those conversations. And so what we've been able to do is create highly realistic simulations with, very sophisticated set, I would say, of avatar customer personas for, in a hyper realistic way that works, again, in kind of like these, knowledge intensive kind of industries. And I think so one of the differentiators there for us, and there's some other people in the space, but there's some people, again, that'll do kind of text to text, voice to voice, maybe kind of limited interactions, but we've been able to succeed in, I would say, like highly realistic, high complexity, long duration interactions, which is kind of where our bread and butter has been.
Yeah, no, so you're really putting people through the paces, make sure they really know how to handle that real world scenario. You're not gonna, if you're a salesperson, you're not generally selling that over text, right?
Right. And I think that's one where, frankly, it's one where there's lots of benefit, right? Especially for products, they may be, there's some that they're more familiar with, there's some they're maybe less familiar with, right? They're able to kind of practice whenever, wherever they want. And also kind of going back to the salesperson culture, frankly, it is a low BS culture, right? Kind of like finance, it's people want them out selling, and some of the things we've been doing has been you're replacing kind of like mock practice internally and so forth, and enabling sellers to be outselling.
Right. And obviously do that at scale, right? If you've got a big 100% sales force, that's really important. Awesome. And then just to sort of round it out, I know there's a whole bunch of other things that you guys do that I was going to ask about, whether or not those are avatar based, like as you get into like some of the employee, insights and all the data that you're able to aggregate and derive insights from around employees, or performance, or just sort of understanding. I don't know if you get into full social analytics mode of looking at interactions across internal platforms or whatever, but I just thought we could just make sure we don't ignore those other valuable use cases.
Sure. What I would say, just taking a step back on the platform, right? At the very beginning, we built the AI avatar coach, right? And as I described, started in the coaching market and on the learning and development side. As we got pulled into other areas within our existing customers, that took us in several different directions across the talent lifecycle. And so we started with, frankly, upstream, right? The space well, talent acquisition and so forth. We were doing things like candidate prep for interviews, right? That led to being able to do the interviews themselves, right? And then thinking about the learning side, we're able to do role-specific simulations for onboarding. We're then able to do role-specific simulations for ongoing development, right? Things like, for individual contributors or for manager training and so forth, again, on the sales side, as we talked about.
Yep.
And kind of closing the loop, that came all the way through to the performance management and employee listening side. And so in many of the applications, we're using avatars to, I would say, like deliver content, to employees and in sort of more of a role play context. And as you just referenced on the performance management or employee insight side, similar but different. In that case, we're using avatars to gather information from employees. If you think about old world of typing performance reviews or things like this at large companies, people hate doing it, very time consumptive, lots of kind of like mental load, as you're sort of thinking about having to do that. We've actually just sent avatars to go talk to people, and gather those insights and synthesize that feedback sort of immediately on the back end. Same thing on things like pulse surveys internally. If you think about any kind of survey you're getting, 1 to 5, 3, 1 to 5, 3, 1 to 5, 3, fill in the box blank. It becomes different when you have a conversational avatar.
I was never a fan of those, and obviously just a sliver of the overall picture of what's really going on with the person, with the team, etc. I was thinking about, effective managers that actually do provide some of this coaching. Obviously, it takes, an empathetic, sort of, I don't know if servant leader is the right, term for this, but just someone who's really taking the time to make sure that their people are successful. But they don't just need to care; they need the bandwidth, which they don't often have. And I was thinking about the avatars and like how, like what they're trained on, and if they ever incorporate the sort of insight and perspective of a real person in the organization, or would that just introduce and scale the human bias of an individual, which we all have our human biases, right? So how, I guess I'm curious how the avatars are designed. Is it just based on sort of best practice? And
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that the main thing, I just probably one of our main differentiators is it's not AI for AI's sake, where AI is defining what the personality of who you're talking to. AI is not defining what good and bad looks like. AI is not defining the scenario itself. So instead, what we'll do is we'll partner with firms either through the scenarios that we've already built or through scenarios that we can customize to make sure that it's really kind of fit for purpose. And so what that means more specifically is if the company has an approach, if they have materials they want to load up to help define, for example, what a sales technique is, how to give feedback at your organization, all of that can be loaded into the system, point and click, and then it now reflects the environment of that which you're trying to help in. So I think the goal here really is to make it, kind of like a custom suit basically, and as opposed to something that is a kind of a wrap around ChatGPT as an example.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important because I mean, aside from the sort of advantage and the novelty of that, I feel like there are just too many, I don't want to call them shiny objects, but in some ways, a lot of these things, they do just try to be like a wrapper around just a core, LLM, and there's no differentiation there. And people are going to notice. I mean, more educated buyers are getting more and more educated, which I want to talk about as well. And so I think these are things that stand out. That says these guys have gone through the paces and they've really put a lot of thought into this. This is something that, they've brought together, the latest technology and, their experience in the trenches of what works and what doesn't. And
hello, I'm Ruth Thomas, host of Comp and Coffee, where we break down what's next in the world of compensation management. From pay transparency to performance alignment, we explore how businesses are rethinking compensation to drive impact, equity, and growth. So if you're shaping the future of pay at your organization, grab a cup and tune in. Listen on the Work Defined Podcast Network.
And you've got a much more compelling solution as a result.
But Bob, one thing I just emphasize there, I think just early days, something that, I think differentiates us relative to peers is early days, we worked with a team of IO psychologists, really experts in the field to help create, the best possible interactions, best possible practice, created our own competency models and so forth around soft skills and other things. And we paired that with, frankly, we think industry leading UX and UI design, to deliver, really, really strong user experience. And then as Mike mentioned, really also have the tooling to turn things from kind of like an off the rack suit into a custom suit very quickly and deploy that at scale. And so harnessing that whole pipeline, right, on behalf of clients makes things feel very seamless, very custom to them, not generic, right, in the way that, a typical, if you were just to kind of ask Q&A, against a ChatGPT, it's not at all like that. It's far more real.
Yeah, for sure. Just on the feedback that you've been getting around the interactions with the avatar, I know there are obviously a bunch of, AI recruiter, AI interviewer types of solutions. They take, different approaches and through different sort of mediums in terms of interaction. Some are purely text-based, some are, a phone call with an AI agent of some sort. And then there's Colleva with the avatars. I'm just curious about like the feedback that you've been getting in terms of the comfort level people have with that, interaction and just anything you can share there.
Yeah. I mean, I think so if you're on the talent acquisition side in particular, it's actually a very interesting space, right? Lots of evolution going on as you referenced earlier, and I think it depends. The answer, the classic answer is sort of an it depends answer. But what I would say is, we've seen obviously differentiation by role, right? So for, high volume roles, obviously there's sort of text chat bots, there's things like voice and so forth. Obviously there's one-way video where we think, and I'll give you some numbers in a second, but avatars, really, really lead is, I would say, the sort of core knowledge worker space, not things like technical interviews for things like engineers, but, again, where the kind of soft skill focus and so forth and communication skills come through. And what we've seen in our work is actually a huge preference for avatars among that populace. And so we've done actually a lot of survey work around it where I want to say it's close to 70% of respondents say they actually prefer and find value in avatars compared to things like voice and text only. And the reasons for that, I think, are, as I mentioned earlier, face is humanizing, right? Everybody opens up more to faces. They inherently feel, they've said they feel less nervous. We have a lot of, great quotes around that from users. And, that's been quite interesting. I mean, I think the other thing, frankly, it's a counterintuitive insight, I think, for many. I think when people think about the AI interviewing space, they think it's something that just kind of, let's say, lower end workers might prefer, and they're concerned about, let's call it knowledge worker professionals, higher end type workers. Our research has actually shown the complete opposite, that space actually really likes AI interviews. They want the chance to be heard. We've had high skill workers, like take financial advisors actually as a segment, very high preference for AI interviews, very high preference for avatar-led interviews, some of the highest, let's call it candidate satisfaction scores we've seen. So very interesting, counterintuitive, same thing with education. The higher education, the more they like AI avatar interviews.
Interesting. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that I guess everyone's different and they're going to have different comfort level. I just think this is the way that things are going. I mean, I'm bullish on the space in general because I empathize with candidates and the constant, ghosting. They're not even sure if the job was real. They're not even sure if the resume was looked at by a human being, and to give them that opportunity, to give every candidate an opportunity to add color to a resume, which more rumors circulating in the last couple of weeks, the resume's dead. We'll see. We've been saying that for a long time, but I do think that you're shortchanging every potential candidate by not giving them an opportunity to expand upon their sort of three-dimensional, career, everything that a resume, whether you wrote it, whether a resume writer wrote it, whether AI wrote it, it doesn't matter. It's still a two-dimensional sort of marketing document. And now it's time you're moving from marketing to selling, right? And so you're giving everyone that opportunity to sell themselves properly. And I do think, I know some would argue you're sort of anthropomorphizing, the AI, but we're talking about simulating real, interaction. And I think it's really the best way to scale, especially the way you guys are doing it, because I know, which we'll talk about in a second, you guys are doing things the right way and you've taken proactive steps to make sure that this is done in an ethical, bias mitigating way, which of course is everything I've been preaching for a couple of years now. So So yeah, so I'm bullish on the space, and yeah, I love what you guys are doing here.
Yeah, and Bob, I'd love to touch on a couple of things you said because I think you
Of
made a
course.
couple of good points. I do think we're moving in the world from, I think you said the two-dimensional resume, right? And the two-dimensional resume existed at a time where people weren't getting that many, right? And obviously now the application volumes are tremendous. People are drowning.
Yeah.
The average recruiter, I think, is spending, I think that the stat is 6 seconds per resume, right? And just kind of flipping the pile, filling their slate. And, frankly, human recruiters do a great job, but they're limited, right, in terms of the amount of time they have to talk to people, right? So it is how do you provide additional signal, right, across the entire candidate pool. And what's interesting is what we found, in our work is candidates really value that, having that opportunity to present themselves in a 3D way. And then as you go towards bias, what we've seen in our research, people don't feel like the existing process is fair, right? So I think there's a whole piece of, they feel like the system's stacked against them, right? They know it's 6 seconds per resume and so forth. What we've seen in our research is, people of color, women, those types of demographics actually very strongly prefer having this opportunity. So we've seen that in various survey results and so forth, that they really do want to have that voice and feel like this is fairer to them. And then the way we're actually handling those interviews themselves, right, at top of the funnel, are in a structured competency-based way, aligned with the role, which itself, leads to, a fairer method of assessment, right? And none of that is, done entirely end-to-end with AI. It's supportive, but, humans are, still ultimately involved in the decision-making process.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, on the human centricity side, I guess that's another objection that I've heard anecdotally, through these LinkedIn conversations that I know we're all actively participating in. But just the fact that, oh well, someone, how can it be human centric if a human being isn't talking to the candidate? It's like how disrespectful for you to not provide anything to a qualified candidate who responded within 12 hours of the job posting, and they still, like, what does it take, right? It's like, it's just this ridiculous situation that people are in, and it's like, well, if you want to be, human centricity is about fairness and respect, right? So if you're not giving those things, then what is it?
Yeah,
What does it matter?
I think right now, right? I think people, the narrative, like if you take the traditional LinkedIn narrative, I'd say, right? I think there's a number of different concerns, but I think people aren't focused enough on, today's process isn't good, right? So when you think about, is today's process fair? There's nothing fair around requiring someone to customize, or feel like they need to customize their cover letter and resume, jam it full of keywords to pass through some ATS system, applicant tracking system.
Yeah.
And then the person is represented by 2 single sheets of paper, right? That somebody spends 6 seconds reviewing. And, there's all this talk about, oh, we need to give human experiences. Congratulations, you got 4,000, applications, and you've given a human experience to 6 of those people, right? So, that doesn't work, right? Now, if kind of next best, happens to be face-to-face avatar, not person, okay, is it as good as a person? No. Is it better than not having anything? Absolutely yes. And that's kind of what everybody's told us, right? And, on the candidate side. And it's quite real and getting realer every day, right? And the nice thing about avatars is you can talk to them when you want, not when, they don't need to be scheduled. They're not going to be tired or cranky, later in the day. They're going to kind of act the same for different candidates at different times.
Yeah, I think that's the main point. One of the main points Mike made is that it's a false narrative. It's not like this is replacing your ability to talk to a human recruiter. The reality is 95% of people are not going to get the opportunity to talk to a recruiter. We're not taking away one single conversation. All we're doing, and we do this really across all of Colleva, and I think that's an important thing to note, is it's not about replacing really anything. It's about empowering and creating skill and magnification. And so that's what this does. This gives the voice, quite frankly, to the voiceless. And it also gives the recruiters an opportunity to really see candidates that maybe didn't use ChatGPT to write the resume. So the resume looks a little worse. It's actually not worse. They're just more genuine, probably authentic. And now you have an opportunity to present yourself that way. So I think this narrative is just completely, it's like a red herring. And I think we need to call it out for what it is.
Yeah, no, excellent points, Mike. I think, I guess just to pile on to that, I also think when people talk about being human centric, it's about like relationships, right? And I just think for any medium to large company, I don't know what relationship you're expecting to build with the recruiter who's doing that initial, recruiter phone screen, that first interview, but you may never see that, talk to that person again. Your mission as a candidate is to get the job, and maybe that job is in HR, maybe that job is in talent acquisition, and you're going to work with this person as a colleague, or maybe it's a leadership position, and you're going to rely on talent acquisition to build your team. But
Hey, it's Libby DeLucian. If you're sick of business advice that sounds cute but doesn't actually move the needle forward, this one's for you. The Libby DeLucian podcast is where we go one layer deep. No gurus, no glitter, just straight up unfiltered talk about scaling a business, running a household, and holding on to your sanity in the middle of the chaos. If you're the bottleneck in your business or in your own life, I'll show you how to fix it. Simple, tactical, and one layer deep every time. Let's go. Visit libbyd.com and check out our podcast today.
in the average scenario, this isn't a relationship with a human being that you should be prioritizing. It should be, let me show you what I'm capable of. Let me show you the potential I have to succeed in this role and to be, a positive influence on the culture of the organization, and to move the organization in the right direction. And let me show you why I'm the right person for this job, and to put a lot of weight on, the fact that you're not allowing me to build a relationship with a human recruiter is just kind of silly.
Well, I think, look, I mean, I'm pro talent acquisition and pro recruiter and pro human recruiter. I think there's certainly a role, but it all comes to highest and best use, right? I mean, it's one of those things where, again, if you have thousands of resumes, right, you just simply can't, no matter how good you are, right, you just simply can't have the thousands of calls. If you can use AI in a way to make yourself more productive and higher impact, right, by using AI to do interviews at the top of the funnel, help identify very quickly, right, who the candidates are that you should be speaking with, you're then enabling, yourself to build a relationship with the right people. And I think it's really around providing leverage to teams that frequently are stretched too thin, and allowing them, the opportunity to spend that time with the right candidates at the right time.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just switching gears a little bit on the sort of AI governance side, obviously when there's a lot of people that are still nervous about, how AI is biased, another false sort of narrative on its face, but AI is biased, and it's also going to scale, that bias, as opposed to human bias, which, at least it's one person making the, a small set of decisions, and that doesn't necessarily scale. But, it could. I mean, that could be a cultural thing within an organization where you have somewhat of a consistent, human bias there. But I think, as the three of us know, and you guys are working on, it's like, well, listen, if the AI is exhibiting bias, we can go back to, the data sources and how it was tested and trained and where'd you get the data from, and we can carefully observe and monitor and course correct where that bias may be exhibited, and essentially continuously monitor that. Forget about, legal requirements in different jurisdictions about, what they need to check for. If you're a trustworthy vendor, you're going to get independently sort of reviewed and audited, and you're going to continuously monitor that to make sure that you don't run into those problems down the road. So I just thought you guys, could sort of unpack your thoughts on that front and some of the work you guys have been doing there.
Yeah, I'd say two things. I think one, I mean, again, I think it's one of these. Certainly, bias is critical, right? And Mike and I, I'd like to say we're sort of mid-career, right? We're very sensitive to these things, and if we were kind of just getting started, we'd still be sensitive, but I think we would have been maybe a little more naive about the technology and what it does, and frankly, where bias exists in the industry. I mean, like when I look at finance, right? And again, you come to false narratives. there's human bias, right? I mean, it was like at early days of my career was, did you go to an Ivy League university and did you play on the lacrosse team that I did? And were you in the same fraternity as an example, right? And then you might get your job on Wall Street, right? I think one of the ways we did was just thinking about it from a first principles approach. I mean, and this comes to working with IO psychologists and so forth that are experts in assessment. We started first principles. Let's do, structured interviewing, competency-based interviewing, around the role specific requirements. Right. And so, it's something where when you break things down to the skills and competencies required for the role, and you're looking for those, inherently, there's less bias involved. And the other piece is defining kind of what good looks like and using AI to sort of pattern match around what good and bad looks like and doing that in a very robust way. One of the things we did, we built a, extremely robust test environment, for anything we're doing to be able to, understand kind of scoring and so forth. We've also done a lot of research testing and so forth. You mentioned bias audits and certification. We've partnered with, third party kind of auditing firm, have been bias audited successfully. We just think it's critical to any solution in the space. But I think it starts with, not looking for upfront, did they go to this particular school? Did they play for this lacrosse team? Were they in the same fraternity? And really how you're architecting from beginning to the end of the process.
Yeah, I just think, just looking at the broader market, and it remains to be seen what happens with some of the legislation, whether there's going to be a moratorium, state and municipal, legislation that already exists or what's going to happen there. But in general, I've said this for a while is, that's a moving target. You already have a sort of a bogey, and that is establishing yourself as a trusted, transparent, and ethical, builder of some of these solutions to put people's minds at ease. And for some period of time, I feel like that in itself is differentiating in the market, because not everyone is taking those steps, those proactive steps. Not everyone is being transparent about what they're doing. And to me, all else being equal, why would you not go with a vendor that's on the up and up?
Well, the reason why you wouldn't, frankly, is as a let's say from a startup, it's not easy, right? I mean, it's if you're a couple guys in a room, right? It takes time to do right. But given Mike and I, our background was enterprise finance, right? We just know how critical it is. The other thing I would say, and it's something interesting maybe just to think about, especially as you're looking at other vendors in the space, it's almost like I'm seeing all these AI interview vendors pop up and so forth. One of the things Mike and I have talked a lot about, like just differentiators for Colleva, not just the, trust factor, bias audits and so forth, but ultimately, we talked about this a little bit, but having the ability to have a talent co-pilot that's end to end. You can buy, you can purchase particular modules from us, you can do talent acquisition, but like ultimately we think, you're having this conversation with this avatar, right? If you're an HR team and you're buying an HR tech solution, how many different vendors do you want? How many avatars do you want on your screen? You want one avatar to interview you for your job, and then another avatar to, welcome you to the firm, and then another avatar to do your performance review, and then, you're going to have this like screen. It's going to look like these Zoom calls, and you're going to have avatar fatigue, right?
Yeah. I've seen some of those.
Yeah, it's like AI note takers, right? 9 AI note takers, 9 avatars, 9 different vendors. Like, so we do think also that there's value to having that ability, at least, to have that in one platform, right? Where maybe you're not ready to start with 5 different use cases today, but you can, it's something where you can grow into over time, and you have a trusted vendor that's been through a tech and legal process and so forth. It just makes it easier for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's the main point of this. It benefits both sides. Employees want a consistent user experience, one that's also quite frankly elevated and, just, joyful to use, so to speak. And from a enterprise side, we've all seen how challenging it is, both for vendors, but also for the HR team, for the tech team, the legal team, the number of things you have to do in order to get through the process. For a company to have to do that 7 different times for 7 basically overlapping / correlated products across the entire journey for the employee, that's just a lot of tax unnecessarily that you're putting on your organization. And so that's kind of been from our mindset from day one is, can we create a unified experience, that can meet the companies where they have the most need right now, prove efficacy and grow with them along their own journey. We have companies we're working with now where their pain point right now is performance management, because having employees write reviews, they may be wary about AI, but they absolutely hate that process. That's an easy win. Other companies really don't understand what everyone does at their organization. They've grown really fast and they want to do a skill assessment across the org. Great. That's where you come in. But being able to do those things, plus, coaching, L&D, TA, all the things we've talked about, in a unified way is, kind of what we think maybe is our secret sauce, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I love that thought. I guess I hadn't thought about it in that holistic context, but it really is important to have some level of continuity as you move throughout the talent life cycle, and to be able to take someone who you trust on the front end to build that future workforce and have that run through talent management and other parts of deeper into HR as an employee, I think is really valuable and comforting on some level, right? Like I don't have to go and evaluate a whole new set of vendors. The IT team is happier because there's fewer throats to choke, as they say, and you're just basically infusing that higher level of trust and confidence through, from applicant to alumni, in a sense, the full life cycle. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think we found it meets the HR buyer where they are. Again, frankly, helps legal teams significantly, right? In that process, it's kind of, they're familiar with one vendor, they know kind of what's going on, right? It helps reduce friction there, and same thing from a tech, diligence process internally. So it is a win-win for everyone, and as well as obviously the end users.
Yeah, awesome. I'm curious what you guys play around with, like when you're not working on Colleva, when it comes to AI. Are there any interesting tools that you guys have come across that you're playing with, either just for your own personal use or something you do with your kids, or anything else that you've caught your attention? Good, something concerning or something exciting? Anything?
Sure. My kids have really become obsessed with ChatGPT Voice, where they'll literally take a picture of their homework assignment, like a quiz, and it basically becomes a interactive quiz for them, and it can help them. You could instruct it to tell me what questions I have to do next or whatever. So that they've really, I think that's been great. They've also been using it for Spanish help. So they'll basically say, I'm a seventh grader. I'm not very good in Spanish. So speak really slowly, but let's practice. And these are the topics I need to cover. And just the flexibility, again, of that kind of Swiss Army knife. They've got a lot of value of that. My wife has nicknamed it Chatty versus ChatGPT. So that's how it's effectively known in our house.
So funny. Kyle Lagunas, I've been working with Kyle Lagunas on this Human-Centric AI Council, and he calls it Chatty G.
I like that. I'm going to take that from Kyle.
Sometimes it takes me a second to have that read. Is he? Because at first when he said it, I thought he was talking about a person. Like, is there somebody who's very talkative whose name starts with G? I'm like, oh yeah, Chatty G. Got it. Anyway, what about you, Michael?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, some of the things I've been doing, frankly, most recently is I think on the business development side. And one of the things in my past life in strategy and M&A at Danaher and so forth was identifying, different companies to work with, different potential partnerships. Been using a lot of agentic AI approaches, frankly, to build like an end-to-end corporate development person. Essentially taking my role, things I did at McKinsey and things I did at Danaher that would have taken me 3 months to do with the team, I've now compressed under a week using, different agentic workflows. I think there's lots of different builders out there. I've been playing with some of those, and Aiden, Gumloop, tools like that, and then, outside really my personal life, but really looking for, I would say a couple things that don't exist quite yet, but I know are coming, but sort of like the AI travel agent that I think is something I think we'll all enjoy. And outside of that, keeping it old school with just kind of normal iPhone games. So that's trying to stay staying digital, but kind of like like non-AI analog there. So
yeah, no, you gotta pace yourself. But
we got
that's
simplify.
Awesome. You guys are doing a lot of tinkering and beyond. So that's awesome. And yeah, the AI in education and for the kids, I think is a whole nother conversation we can have, Mike. I mean, this is crucial. I mean, you're already seeing job applications, looking for these types of skills, some level of proficiency and what have you. So,
Bob, one thing I just like chime in there. I mean, it's actually really interesting. I mean, just to give you an example, and I would encourage, I know you're involved in the education space and all of this. We had an intern this summer so far who, is mentioning some of the AI tooling that been playing around with on the corporate development side. Had an intern from college, no real business experience, frankly, producing work at the level of, I'd say a McKinsey associate within week 1 or week 2 on the job. Just we became increasingly fast with AI, a little bit of direction, but, encourage everybody, obviously, if somebody of that age and demographic can do it, I mean, there's no reason a more tenured person in their career, a more seasoned professional can't, and incumbent upon all of us to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, a lot of universities are already, giving that access. And I assume the teachers are, on board and they're incorporating it into their curriculum and their work as well. It's not just for the students. So yeah, early days, but yeah, I think it's really, really important. Could probably start in middle school, frankly, but I won't get on my high horse about that.
I would say, Bob, even what you and I were talking about is trying to work with high schools. I mean, I know we both have children high school age, of working with administration to understand kind of the good uses of AI and the not so good uses. I mean, AI should not be writing, essays for children, but having it be a brainstorm or a sounding board, for research projects, super impactful. Using something like Perplexity to actually get, be a research assistant and give you cited quotes that are useful. And then some of the more advanced ones that Mike's talking about. But this is the future. We're all going to be editors. That's just the reality going forward. Making sure, high school, as you mentioned, even middle school kids can understand and get facile with that reality. I think the sooner rather than later is pretty important.
Yeah, I won't be able to let go of that because I just know that that's an enormous opportunity, and we're shortchanging our kids by not showing them how to use these things and use it properly. I mean, it should be fun for them to use it, and it should be extremely helpful. Not everyone can afford a tutor or a coach like that. So some amazing tools, and I think their creativity and curiosity can be directed in a very constructive way to help themselves in the process. So yeah, I know we're just about up on time, but I didn't want to wrap up without talking about the upcoming NYU Coaching and Technology Summit that I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at. So I just thought just give you a minute to just talk about what you're looking forward to there as a sponsor of that event.
Yeah, great. So it's going to be an amazing conference. Anna Tavis is running it over at NYU. It's the 7th and 8th of July. So I think tickets are still available. They have in addition to speakers, they have a room set up for a lot of different vendors, both emerging and more established, to show to kind of where the future is, both for coaching and technology. And they've split the conference, interestingly, into 2 days, kind of general coaching and then healthcare. So very exciting for Colleva because we basically span both areas, but we have a lot of New York-based clients who I know are coming. So it's a great opportunity. We'll be demoing there. I'll also be speaking on the 8th. I think it's 2:45, something like that. But anyone is interested in coming, would love, please stop by the booth, and we'll be showing kind of all the different use cases. And really, I think most importantly, how, and I think this is all of what we do, all about kind of empowering, not replacing. And I think a lot of companies are really rushing, again, for AI's sake, a lot of shiny toys. This is really meant to for reinforce, be the homework for things you already have, and kind of meet you where you are and plug and play. I mean, that's one thing we didn't mention at all about Colleva is you're set up in a day. I mean, it's super easy, and we've kind of built it in a way that we can know your organization. You can use your own products, describe them, have your own conversations, which feels real and actionable, on day one.
Nice. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I just registered the other day, so it should be a great 2 days. Thank you guys so much for joining me. This was great. Wish you the best of luck, of course. And Mike, I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
Michael, you coming too?
I won't be there, but I'll be there in spirit.
Of course.
Bob, thanks for having us.
I'm going to live stream you, Mike.
Yeah, that's all right.
Right.
But just want to say thanks for having us on. We've truly enjoyed your show and really appreciate the work you've done in responsible AI and being a thought leader there. So just want to thank you for that as well.
Thank you so much,
100%.
Michael. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. All right, guys. Thank you again. And we will talk again soon.
Great.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.